roll call for them. Who's up there?
That's three. Setting, yeah.
I'm Doug, the chair of this body. I want to introduce Elton Oates, his partner, who's commissioner and co-chair. Welcome tonight. Really glad that you all could come to help us find our way forward here. Thank you very much for that. We first taking up the agenda, it's been mentioned to me that the public comment, the way it's scheduled, is after the deliberation time of the committee, and following our brother and sister advisory committees, I would like to recommend to you that we move that public comment section on to right after the presentation by the staff, and your own questions are answered. Not for a long discussion, just to have questions answered. Then we'll open it for public comment at that point, and then come back to the discussion on committee, advisory committee members about the topic at hand, if that is okay with the advisory committee. So with that, is there a motion that we adopt the agenda as amended? Scott made. Yes, and if you don't mind, call out your name when you have a comment, and for people here and on the phone, if I don't see you, please don't be shy about making sure, and the staff will help me and Sarah make sure that you're recognized in a timely fashion. Motion is made. Is there a second?
I'll second. Nathan Hall.
Second by Nathan. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Guess do we have to roll call?
We don't have to with this one. We could just do by.
Without objection,
Not just-
without objection, we'll adopt the amended agenda for tonight. The first matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, which you have had. There are a motion for the minutes from the April the 19th meeting. Anybody?
Yep.
Motion made. Second?
Question. I never got the minutes from the April 19th, 2023 meeting. I was looking for them.
Didn't get them in the meeting materials?
Can you send them to me now? Resend them?
A minute.
Okay.
Okay, in that case, why don't we hold in abeyance the approval? We have a motion on the floor without a second at this point, so we'll come back to that moment, if you don't mind resending those in. Thank you. So we'll come back to that. The main issue, single focus tonight has to do with the protection of critical seagrass habitat, including through shrimp trawl area closures. Chris Stewart will make the presentation from the staff. We'll accept comments, not comments, but questions from committee members, and then accept public comment and questions at that point, and then come back and discuss it with her for the rest of the time. So Chris, are you ready? Excellent. Thank you.
Technology lined up. All right, so I'm gonna have to switch back and forth from using this Adobe and the AGOL, which shows all of the maps. This is a presentation, so bear with me. But my name is Chris Stewart. I'm a biologist in the Wilmington Regional Office and the species lead for shrimp. And I'm joined by my co-leads in the audience, Jason Rock and Dan Zaft. And today I'll be discussing the protection of critical seagrass through shrimp trawl area closures. Throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to submerged aquatic vegetation as SAV. And before I get started, I'd like to thank staff at the Albemarle Pamlico National Estuary Partnership for coordinating SAV mapping efforts, as well as the other partners at NOAA, DWQ, NC Wilmington, and IMS, who have all contributed to the coast-wide monitoring. The culmination of the aerial and ground-based monitoring data were used to comprise the historical and maximum known extent of SAV habitat, which I'll refer to as the mosaic. I also like to thank the CHIP staff for their input, as well as this division's GIS staff. Close this little box. Never mind. We'll first go over Amendment 2 to the Shrimp FMP and adaptive management. Next, I'll provide a brief background on the importance of SAV habitat and the impact of bottom disturbing gears. We will then discuss the management options by CHIP region, as well as the division's recommendation. And after questions from the AC, the division would like input on the management options presented, as well as the Habitat and Water Quality AC's recommendation for additional shrimp trawl area closures to protect SAV. What you see on the screen right now is the Commission's directive management strategy, directing the Habitat Water Quality AC to provide input. February 2022, the Commission adopted Amendment 2. With this adoption, several management strategies were implemented to further reduce bycatch of non-target species and minimize ecosystem impacts. The Commission's management strategy included adaptive management for future action to address issues related to SAV, identified through collaboration with CHIP support staff, Habitat and Water Quality AC, and stakeholder groups. Adaptive management combines management and monitoring with the aim of improving decision-making over time as more information becomes available. In the context of our FMPs, adaptive management is an optional management framework that allows for specific management changes to be implemented between FMP reviews under specific conditions to accomplish the goal and objectives of the plan. The next review of the shrimp FMP is in 2027. This issue paper provides an adaptive management strategy to further protect SAV habitat in North Carolina by identifying unprotected SAV using updated imagery and providing additional protection through shrimp trawl area closures. This strategy supports Amendment 1 goal of protecting and restoring SAV habitat with improved stakeholder collaboration, monitoring, and targeted action to reduce physical disturbance of SAV. It's been well established in the scientific literature that SAV is critical habitat for many economically important species such as fish and invertebrates. They are federally designated as essential fish habitats and habitats of areas of particular concern for many species in the shrimp family, snapper grouper, and spiny lobster, as well as summer flounder. SAV also provides other ecological functions such as refuge, forage, corridor, spawning, and nursery areas for many species such as flounder, red drum, spotted sea trout, snapper grouper, and bay scallops, blue crabs, and pinnate shrimp. It increases structural complexity, aids in sediment and shoreline stabilization, improves water quality, primary and secondary production, and nutrient cycling, as well as carbon intake.
Little tongue twist.
Sequestration, I can't say it, provides significant market and non-market value to North Carolina's economy through tourism, property value, commercial and recreational fisheries values. Impacts from bottom disturbing gears include reduction in habitat complexity, reduced community composition, shearing and cutting of SAV leaves, flowers, and seeds, and uprooting of SAV. It buries SAV, increases turbidity and sedimentation, which can reduce water quality and in turn reduces SAV growth, productivity, and survival. and limits nutrient regeneration, and it disrupts the food webs within these ecosystems. The 2021 amendment to the CHIP divides the mosaic into 9 SAV regions to best represent regional variability of the water bodies. Proposed shrimp trawl area closures are presented by the CHIP SAV regions. No additional shrimp trawl closures are needed in Region 1 since shrimp trawling is prohibited throughout the Albemarle and Currituck Sounds. No additional shrimp trawl closures are needed in Region 9 due to the absence of documented SAV. Elevated tide heights in the southern portion of the state increases turbidity and light attenuation, thus limiting growth of SAV. So now I'd like to briefly review the proposed management options for each region, and I'll switch back and forth using the AGUL to illustrate the proposed closures. It's important to note that the management options were developed with the goal of creating broad buffers that protect SAV habitat from physical disturbance, turbidity, and sedimentation. Additionally, the proposed closures will increase connectivity between SAV habitat and other essential fish habitats. Existing navigation aids, landmarks, other management boundaries were used to promote compliance and simplify enforcement. It's also important to note that division does not have shrimp trawl effort data specific to each SAV region, thus the precise economic impact to the shrimp trawl fishery cannot be estimated, but effort was made to balance SAV protection and impacts to fishermen when determining these closure boundaries. And I'd like to note too, for many of these proposed closures, effort is currently limited due to water depth, strong currents, and obstructions in the water, whether it be natural oyster rock or shellfish leases. And ultimately, fishermen don't want to trawl in SAV. It fouls their nets. Increased bycatch results from the high abundance of species found within SAV, and it just limits the number of haulbacks they can do in a day if they're currently dumping their bags, having to sort through shrimp. So to get into SAV Region 2, the Albemarle Roanoke Sound, the first option is to prohibit shrimp trawling along the western shoreline of the Roanoke Island from Weir Point to Mans Harbor Bridge. As well as option 2, limit shrimp trawling to main channel only, 100 feet either side of the Roanoke Sound channel. It's slow to pop up. Give it a second. If this does not work, we can come back and use the AGUL and try to use it to
Did you share a screen or application?
share screen.
Sharing and then resharing.
Do it by file too.
Because
On mine, it says you're sharing an application.
It's like,
It is acting very weird. Maximize it. Do it right there.
stop it.
It's your web browser.
yes. Without a map. Might be taxing it too hard.
Yeah, there might be too much going on. All right, we'll come back to the AGUL.
Sharing your screen now.
Sure.
But what I meant is,
Share it as WebEx screen.
There it is. Maybe.
No, you're still sharing your WebEx screen, so stop sharing. Yep. And then share. Yep.
It might work.
Alright.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
If you need
Searching, so you just pop that up.
Go back to the PowerPoint, we'll see.
Not from that. You looked up and share. That's why I'll just sit next to you.
All right, so to get into it, option one, as I said, is prohibit shrimp trawling along the western shoreline of Roanoke Island from Weir Point to Mans Harbor Bridge. Zooming in, you can see this is where we chose. A little bit about the AGUL. If you look at the maps in the issue paper, see it's a slightly different color. It's due to the transparency we had used to show the SAV. But SAV is in the dark green. The currently closed areas are in the dark gray, and then the pinkish hue color is the proposed closed areas. And later on in the discussion, we can bring up the other layers to show some of the other shellfish resources, leases, et cetera, channel markers, whatever you might want to discuss. And one thing to note about the Region 2, it connects right here at this line with Region 5. So part of our intent was to increase connectivity, not only for SAV habitat, but for the fishermen who work this area. And talking with staff from this area in Marine Patrol, majority of shrimp trawling occurs in the main channel only, carrying over into Region 5, but I don't want to jump to Region 5 yet. And I can go back.
Just hit stop. I know.
All right, so we're going to go straight through the PowerPoint and discuss each of these options, and then we'll come back
I got it sharing your screen now.
with the AGUL.
Got it sharing your screen now.
Okay. All right, for option 3, is to prohibit shrimp trawling the designated pod areas in the Pamlico Bay and Neuse rivers, particularly Vandermeer, off Vandermeer, Bonner Bay, Fisherman's Bay, Turnagain Bay, and South River. These designated pod areas are closed to shrimp trawling from June 1 to November 30th in waters less than 6 feet. This would provide permanent protection to SAV habitat without with limited impact to fishermen, as most of the shrimping have already moved off these areas come December 1st. And most of the effort is concentrated in the middle portion of the sound and in and around Oregon Inlet. Brown shrimp have already left, and there's a little bit of white shrimp remaining. These are option 3. If you can see, these are, and we did not choose to do a blanket designated pod area closure. These are the only ones that had SAV present in them. It's where you can only trawl outside of and during June 1st to November 30th, and it's less than 6 feet of water. Crab potters pots are fine there. They're safe from being trawled up, dragged away. So that's already established pretty much in the thick of shrimp season. And we can zoom in on these a little bit later. All right, Region 4. Create and expand existing closures along the western shoreline of Dare and Hyde counties to include the bays and tributaries from Mans Harbor to West Bluff. So that would be starting from here all the way down to West Bluff Bay. Many of the bays are already closed due to being primary nursery areas and secondary nursery areas. So these closures would complement that. We chose to do straight line closures because at the mouth of the bays, going point to point is much easier for law enforcement as well as the public for compliance. And as I said, it also establishes a buffer protecting the SAV from sedimentation and turbidity. And again, everything in the light purple, pinkish color is the proposed closures, and everything that's in black is already currently closed. And green is grass. Moving on to Region 5. Limit shrimp trawling to the main channel only, 100 feet either side. As I mentioned before, this connects to Region 2. And also should be done in concert with option 2 if you're going to do those two. Prohibit shrimp trawling along the western shore of Roanoke Island to the Mans Harbor Bridge to the northmost tip of Wanchese Seed Oyster Management Area. That would be right around in here. Sorry for the delay. Modify the existing trawl net prohibited area along the Outer Banks to include portions of the western shoreline behind Salvo and Buxton Harbor. More or less, we're just going to extend these out and grab some of these areas that weren't included in the original shrimp trawl prohibited areas. This increases connectivity between SAB habitats and regions, particularly regions 2 and 5, and it leaves much of the Crowatown Sound open to trawling, which is identified at Shrimp AC as an important area for fishermen, particularly small rough boats and skimmer trawls. In Core Sound, prohibit trawling in Core Sound and its tributaries except for the mechanical clam harvest area. This option was straight from Amendment 2. It creates connectivity between SAB habitats and regions, and many of the bays in and around this area have not opened since 2017, 2018. So it wouldn't be a change in management for the most part. It simplifies enforcement and compliance. And you can see the high density of SAB on the eastern side of Core Sound, as well as in many of the bays and special secondaries. You see there's a high presence of special seagrass, and we can zoom into that later. In Region 7, prohibit shrimp trawl in the Straits, Back Sound, and their tributaries. Due to the patchy distribution of SAB in this area, broad closures that create a buffer between open areas and they increase connectivity are recommended. Broad buffers also protect SAB from turbidity and sedimentation. Looking at this area, we tried to look at main channel only options, and it was just in such close proximity to the SAB. Staff felt it was better to have broad closures that increase connectivity and limited impacts of turbidity and sedimentation. Modify the existing lines and create new lines in the Newport River and the North Rivers. And this map is really small, but in the North River, we decided to go with the mechanical clam harvest line. However, in the Newport River, we went with a modified line that would allow shrimp trawling to occur in the western portion of Newport River. And this still allows shrimp trawling in Core Creek, which is an important area for many small boats, as well as still allow people to trawl right up against the current line. And option 11, limit shrimp trawling along the IWW from Cedar Point to Sanders Island. The White Oak River has less extensive SAB, but it's primarily found at the mouth of it, particularly below the Highway 124 bridge. Queens Creek has SAB mostly found at the mouth as well, around the Hammocks Beach area, and around Bear Creek. It's pretty much shallow. Trawling occurs south of Willis Landing. It's surrounded by PNA, and most of the trawling occurs at the mouth of it. So most of the SAB occurs at the mouth of it. So it only makes sense to close pretty much the whole area where the trawling occurs and where the SAB is present. Region 8. This is the area from Browns Inlet to Snow's Cut. Modify existing or create new shrimp trawl closure lines in the New River. This is pretty much only in the New River where we're trying to make adjustments to the line. Below much of the mechanical clam harvest area, a lot of this area is shallow, but we did see an area that has a significant amount of SAV right below the 172 bridge. And that is right around Fulcher's Landing. There was also a large portion of unprotected SAV right off Everett's Creek to the western side of Stones Bay. Currently, there's a lot of leases in this area, as well as some natural shellfish resources, and staff felt it was best to use channel markers to mark this off. So it still allows access to the main channel, but everything to the west of the channel would be closed. And in support of the CHIP, DMF recommends creating management buffers to protect SAV habitat from physical disturbance, turbidity, and sedimentation by implementing broad regional specific shrimp trawl closures. The division recommends management options 1 through 12. So the next steps, the division will present this issue paper to you all, and we would like to get your recommendation to bring to the Marine Fisheries Commission at the February 2024 business meeting. If new measurement measures are selected, shrimp trawl area closures will be implemented via proclamation authority of the director in 2024 in accordance with Amendment 2 to the Shrimp Fishery Management Plan. The division, as well as AFNet staff, will continue to conduct annual statewide monitoring on a rotating schedule during spring and fall of each year to evaluate SAV health and abundance as part of adaptive management. And if you guys have any questions after this meeting, our contact information as well as the co-leads is on the screen. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and we'll be happy to answer any questions right now. And as I mentioned earlier, the division would like your input on the management options presented, as well as other possible solutions not presented. And please provide the habitat and water quality AC recommendation for additional shrimp trawl area closures to protect SAV for us to take back to the commission. And with that said, I'll be happy to answer questions and go to the AGL and stay away from this PowerPoint.
Thanks, Chris, appreciate it. So before I open it to committee member questions first, and then the public, just for clarity's sake, this is going forward, not from de novo, not from first principles, but rather directly as an implementation of the adaptive management process already approved by the commission as Amendment 2 in the shrimp plan.
Yes, sir. So with Amendment 2, this was one of their selected management strategies. They specifically asked for the habitat and water qualities AC input, and then we will bring it back to them.
Are there other advisory committees?
They specifically asked for input from you guys. There's a strong chance that it could go to the commission, and due to the stretch of some of the closures, they might want to bring in the northern and southern, and since it involves shrimp, shellfish crustacean as well. So that would be in the commission's court.
If that's not already planned, that might happen after the upcoming meeting.
Corinne might be able to speak to that better.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Just
so,
trying to help everybody understand the process.
Yep,
before I go.
yep. So the process on the adaptive management ended at it coming here and to the commission. Once it goes to the commission, though, the commission always has the ability to send it to other advisory committees for more input from stakeholders, especially whomever it's going to impact. So the commission has the ability at the meeting to then at the April meeting have the northern, southern shellfish, whoever they want, to review it. And upon their review, then it would come to the commission at the May,
May.
let's skip one, May, at the May meeting, and then the commission could make their final decision or,
Okay.
whatever they decide. So,
Right,
but
right.
that there, either is a proper process.
Okay, that's great. The second thing, I think, just for clarity, is that there is no allegation on the table that shrimp trawling by itself is the sole threat kind of a thing. And I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that there is parallel measure underway under the aegis of the Environmental Management Commission, but also in consultation with, through the CHIP Steering Committee and these other two commissions, to move forward with water quality standard adoption that is specifically designed based on the sensitivity of seagrass and seagrass habitats to those kinds of threats, so the non-crawling threats. And that's moving forward in, you know what the time frame is?
I was told that they're hoping, it's at the staff level now, and they're hoping to present it to their EMC the end of 2024.
And then the third thing is that, again, this, the way I understand this, is that it's not focused on protecting today's footprint of existing plants, but rather clarifying the habitats that seagrass beds move through time, so that the full footprint of the SAV habitat would be being conserved through those two prongs. That's correct. So we're looking at where seagrass habitat is today and ought to be in the future.
This is the maximum known extent using all the imagery from 1981 to 2021.
And just for clarity for the committee, that has to do with water depth, sediment, and sediment type, and today, the penetration of light.
Wave
given
energy.
Conditions and energy, right?
So this is where it's actually been
Wave
documented.
energy. That's right. And so there's a precise set of definitions for SAV habitat, whether or not it's currently vegetated. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay.
MFC rule book has a definition for SAV, but it also includes the bare spaces between it. And it has in there language that, as long as it's been documented within, in the past.
And just for clarity there, that also then cascades into North Carolina rules under really all three commissions as they pertain to coastal development and water quality. Even outside of North Carolina, where the South Carolina Council has designated SAV in North Carolina as essential fish habitat areas of particular concern, which brings with it a whole suite of federal. Right?
That's correct.
Okay. So are there questions for the staff from committee members?
There is one question online.
Okay.
Lisa Ryder asked, what's the main difference between the closure lines in North and New River?
Actually, and I really meant the difference between North River and the Newport River. There was a slight difference in the kind of process and how I think those closure lines were determined, and I missed that part of it. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
So when we were trying to draw these lines out, particularly in the Newport River, you can see a lot of the SAV is concentrated the western shoreline. And then when you look at pretty much the rest of the shoreline up to the shrimp lines and into Core Creek, SAV is absent. So staff felt that, using the mechanical clam harvest lines was grabbing too much. Whereas here, you didn't really have too many other options because pretty much the mechanical clam harvest area is surrounded by SAV, even at the mouth coming in. And this area is really, really troublesome because even if you went for a main channel only closure in this area, you're still right beside the SAV and you run the risk of turbidity and sedimentation. And if you guys have any other areas you'd like to focus in on, or,
Is that responsive, Lisa?
Yes, thanks so much. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Questions from other members?
I was curious about South River and along West Bays where the main bodies of them, because they're fairly deep. And
problem with South River is there's SAV. All along the shoreline. Like you said, it's fairly deep and it makes it really difficult to draw a line down the middle. If you are playing with this online, you can see there's very limited channel markers too. So we didn't have a really defined channel to go for. So in the best interest of SAV, we felt it was the better thing to do to close that area because you still have access pretty much to the noose.
is that pretty much the same story for along West Bay and Turning Bay?
Urban Bay is about the same where you see that. Again, it's sporadically throughout there. So if you see the proposed shrimp trawl closure, any of these little coves within here, tributary creeks were already closed.
In regards to just general, not necessarily a particular area, has there been, we're talking about closing it down to regrow seagrass and protect what was there. Is there historic data that, hey, there was seagrass there in the 80s? Is that like how you're determining this? Because it's something that's not really hit on that if it's, did it disappear in the 90s or is this like been gone for the majority of our lifetimes from decades ago damage and now we're saying, hey, let's put it back.
I can speak to that. So what we've done here for the GIS is it's called the maximum extent. So it combines all the different mapping events because there are places that got mapped, say, in the 80s that didn't, but not everywhere. Or in 1992, it was a certain water body. So we've combined them all over different time periods. But in the more recent years, there's a more concerted effort. And through APNEP, they've secured funding for mapping, and we've gotten a partnership together to do the monitoring. So we could tell you with some analysis, and we have all the individual layers when it was there last. But from this, we can't tell you right now. But we have lost some SAV in some areas, but mostly along the deep water edge, or like a little bit more patchy, but not all the way gone, where maybe it was in the early 90s, it was dense and continuous. Now it might be patchy. It's still there and it could come back given weather conditions and water clarity.
We have seen a shift in certain species, in certain areas that are more tolerant.
Yeah, we're seeing an increase in the shoalgrass, which is it likes it on the warmer side, whereas eelgrass is more in a little bit more of a decline. It's at the southern limit, so.
But everything you see in green is documented. It was there at some point.
My differentiation was between what you've documented as green and then the extensive pink area or whatever color you want to refer to that as is really exceeding that. And I'm trying to determine if, like, with this closure, is it going to guarantee the regrowth out to those lines or predicted out to those lines?
It prevents one stressor, which is the
Okay.
physical disturbance. So now through the chip, as Dr. Rader explained, we're working on the runoff issues and the water quality issues. So collectively, it's going to take addressing multiple stressors to get it to come back.
And some fairly strong opinions about this that I was going to withhold, but I'll tease you with it a little bit, and that is, actually, Mr. Skinner and I talked about it before, if you don't mind. It does seem that the absence of a strong goal for what success looks like, not just for seagrasses, but also for shellfish beds and all other kinds of habitats, which is frankly one of those things that those of us that helped write this language in the Marine Fisheries Reform Act way back when, had hoped would happen and never really did. There's a tremendous amount of information that's in the CHIP and also in the habitat plans, the South Atlantic Council, ASMSC, and the Mid-Atlantic Council, but not anywhere that I'm aware of is there actually a prospective goal being set for or adequate extent of protect well enough protected habitats to protect and promote all of the species that we also are obligated to protect habitat for. So that there's another generation of science and aspiration I think needed. But at this point, it does seem to me, and again, this is just personal, not anything else, is that being able to, for people to understand that we are going together to make the investment in a tracking system that monitors what we have today, what we have tomorrow, 10 years from now, how successful that program, those programs coming together has been, is going to be really essential. Because otherwise, it may well be the case that this is just aspirational, and if the other threats aren't mitigated, or the investment isn't made in reforesting the seed necessary to make that habitat come back and stay back, at the end of the day, will disadvantage users without providing that offsetting benefit. So I do have, again, that's just a personal view on
Joel has his hand up.
Joel?
In the areas that have been closed for some time, is the grass coming back? Is it measurable? Is there any data that shows it's working?
Has the closure. So one of the biggest areas we have where there's no trawling allowed, where there was grass, is that no trawl area along the Outer Banks. Is there evidence that it has, it was done as a preventive measure. That was done in, anybody know this, 90s? But the no trawl area was, it's been a while. And it was done when it was less developed and when the grass was in fairly good shape. That was done is to prevent the damage, because that is where the majority of the acreage is, and it's very shallow. So I can't say that it's helped recover the grass, but it certainly helped prevent more damage to that grass.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Nope.
I mean, I think the piece that's hard for us as scientists is to parse out which of these components is greater doesn't matter, but how they work together. You know, how our quality changes, which have mostly been towards the worst, have interacted with direct to beds themselves. So that's why I personally am in favor of putting these things together. And so bringing the action from the EMC to bear on this same problem. I will remind you that when the CHIP plan was adopted by all three commissions, that question was identified as one of the most important priorities in it, and they are moving forward and implementing CHIP and directly addressing that by identifying those thresholds for nutrient delivery particularly, but also water clarity and other things that would limit the growth, continuing growth of existing and the restoration of areas that had been lost. And so that's not yet done, but it's in the agenda to be done. I think it seems to me it's a good time to look at putting those things together. But also, as Mr. Skinner made clear to me, that we'd be accountable for assessing whether or not those investments are working. And I agree with it.
I did want to mention one thing. There's, we started keeping track of SAV basically in 1981. That's when the Mosaic,
Joel's hand still.
the earliest data comes from 1981, but there's pretty good data, especially in the low salinity areas, like up the creeks and up the rivers. There's pretty good evidence, based on some physical documentation, but also really good evidence from geological records. You can look at the mud and see what's in the mud and tell you how much SAV there used to be. Used to be a lot more. We probably lost half of the low salinity SAV prior to 1981 before you even started keeping track of it. So that's,
We
Yeah.
used to say historic, but it really isn't that historic.
it's not, no.
Look at what other states have and documentation of their grass. It goes way further back.
Yeah, that's, not to be argued, in my view, that suggests that we ought to be looking at where we're going.
No, yeah, I agree in it, but looking back where you probably have been,
No, I agree with you 100%.
yeah.
So Joel, is your hand still up? I think so.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if it seems like this has come up a few times, but that Straits Channel area, when I looked at the maps a few weeks ago, that's what caught my eye, and I appreciate that the division has considered that and explained the logic. As we decide which of these options we'd want to accept, I guess at this point, what my question would be is, option 2 is to leave a very narrow channel open to trawling. I believe it's option 2. And so maybe if the staff could walk us through the logic of why it seemed like it was a good idea to leave that channel open, but not Straits Channel. Those are smaller trawl boats that would probably be in Straits Channel. I've never seen a great big boat there. So yeah, there's the question. So Straits Channel seems like you were worried about adjacent effects, but under option 2, that seems to not have been as big of a concern.
Might be hard to see here, but I turn on the aids of navigation, more or less, channel markers. You can see the channel runs really close to lots of these big patches of very dense SAV all throughout this area. It's very hard to draw a line and pick a path that would not pretty much impact the SAV in this area. When we looked at region 2 or option 2, we originally looked at it and I drew the lines up and we took it to staff to further discuss. Sorry for driving. I had actually brought that line way down to come all the way through this, but staff felt that it was way too close to the SAV. So we stopped it right before it hit that big patch. So we did have consideration for it for option 2. We stopped it short before we got here where it goes pretty much straight through some of the densest SAV around Oregon Inlet. As you said, it probably will impact smaller boats more so than larger boats. They're likely ruckle holders. It's protected for future generations. This generation might know there's SAV over there and to stay out of this area. Somebody coming in new, buying a ruckle license, I'm going out there and trawl up some shrimp. I might just trawl wherever I can not get hung, and that might be right over SAV. So it is just really so patchy behind the straits. Made it very difficult to draw lines that made sense and still create buffers. The notion of having buffers to protect from sedimentation and turbidity was our #1 goal. A lot of this, as well as increased connectivity. If you look right here to the left, in Bogue Sound, that was closed with Amendment 2. The commission at the time chose to do main channel only there. They did not even give 100 feet on either side. So, and it stopped short of right here. This right here is the Crab Spawning Sanctuary closure that came in with Amendment 2. So by doing the proposed closure, we're increasing the connectivity between the 2 regions and SAV habitat, and that was another one of the main goals. But it makes it very difficult to draw lines in here. By closing the straits, people still have the option to go to North River and Newport River. And not to mention that area is a high traffic area for recreational boaters. Reduces conflict.
Probably something we should grab and put on the sign in the weather inadequately marked channels that are used by recreational boaters exacerbate some of those risks, which I don't know anything about myself, but I've heard other people ask that question. Other questions from the committee?
I'm curious what you meant by what you just said. Exacerbates risks to.
Yeah, so
Seagrass?
so there's disturbance coming from shrimp trawling, there's also disturbance coming from recreational boat.
Okay, that's
Driving and misdriving, whatever the right word is. And I think we've all seen people up on the shallows, right? And so if there are inadequately marked channels, even within these areas that ultimately the commission decides to go forward with closing, and that risk can be mitigated by better marking, then we ought to maybe perhaps think about recommending other actions. Because we're not constrained in the longer term to respond only to what the staff has thought.
Typically, Marine Patrol would like to use navigation markers that are in existence and points, things that are easy to reference. In the New River, there used to be a shrimp line where they had telephone poles up and they eventually fell down and they never got put back up. But people know where the point-to-point line is. I can't speak for Marine Patrol, but I don't see us putting additional signage out in certain areas, just due to the cost. We understand that some of these closures will impact, certain boats more so than others. I mean, added benefit of a lot of this, for the most part, these areas, people aren't trawling. The Straits being the exception. I know there's some effort there. Probably will get a small reduction in bycatch, but with that said, that is not the aim of these closures. Effort is already limited in a lot of these areas, so any kind of reductions we get in bycatch is just icing on the cake. This is all about seagrass, using the most current data we have.
Thanks, Chris. Other questions, quick questions from the committee? I don't see any, so let's move to the public questions if you can. Back to the staff. Got 5 people signed up to speak. If you can hold it to 2 minutes, that would be great, just so we can bring to the discussion after. So, Mr. Skinner, do you want to go first? Questions, fair game.
All right, I've got a couple of questions. Also got some very strong thoughts if anybody wants to talk after this, but I'm gonna stick to the questions for staff right now, and this is on process for implementing this. If it goes forward, I'll make recommendations. And first, I want to ask staff, if these closures go into place, are they permanent closures? Are they closures that would be optional for opening throughout the year, or is it going to be permanently closed if it was implemented?
Would be permanently closed.
And that's what I thought. And now my next question is, what is the variable condition that would allow DMF to use proclamation authority rather than rulemaking? Because proclamation authority is contingent on a variable condition, and a permanent closure is not variable. It does not open again. There's no chance of it opening again. So what is the variable condition that would allow for a proclamation to be used rather than the MFC having to go through rulemaking and all the checks and balances in that rulemaking process rather than that down and dirty proclamation? And that's what I have. Hopefully I can get an answer.
Intent is to close these areas to protect SAB habitat. So once it's closed, we don't plan on opening it because of the suitability for SAB to come back and protect the existing SAB that's there.
I think he understands that the question, the legal question really is to whether it's appropriate to use proclamation authority to implement adaptive management for Amendment 2. That's why
To get immediate action, we would do proclamation, let it go into place, and then go into rule. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong.
This would be under the compliance with,
That's part of Amendment 2.
I would just question for the record whether there is a variable condition here and proclamation authority would be that process and all that.
I think we should take, that's outside of our purview. We should probably take that under advisement back to the commission. But thank you, Mr.
If I
Skinner.
can add, I would say that there is a variable condition in that by being adaptive management, if something changes and the grass cannot come back, so that means 10 or more years, then you could make some changes. So that is a variable condition. Idea is to protect where grass, where it's suitable for grass.
The plan is to map it
Yeah, there is.
rotational basis.
Yeah, there's an ongoing plan through APNEP SAV team. They provide, APNEP provides funding so far. Map, we've broken the coast into 5 areas. And then they use a team of different agencies to do the in the field monitoring. So because it's so large, we've gone to like one zone and the next year another zone. So every area would be mapped at 5 years. Would be assessment. I'm thinking like catastrophic, a new inlet goes through core sound. And so it's going to cause a lot more wave energy. You know, that grass is going to be gone. So after a certain amount of time, you might want to, you know, modify those closures.
My crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but I expect what will actually happen is that, well, hopefully the EMC does its thing. These two pieces come together and in some places work great, in some places work hard, don't work at all. So with that information in hand, then it'd be possible for the director and the commission together to come back and adjust these. And I think that adjustment might work either direction. There probably are going to be some categories of places that actually are habitat in the future. In fact, where light penetration is better once the standards are in place. But again, that's premature. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Chair. Brent Fulcher. I was here last night sitting where y'all sat. I'm an a fin fish advisor. But that being said, I want to kind of touch on that because I've been thinking about it since we sitting here. And I asked all y'all to be objective to understand that your goal is to protect the SAV, but at the same time, I don't think that your goal is to disadvantage someone if we can't show a very valid reason to close something that's presently open. And when I look at that, thinking about, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, look at where all your oyster harvest was back in the early 1900s. Washington, it was in New Bern. Your industry was there. There's nothing that can survive there now because it's 4 to 6 foot of silt in those riverbeds. And you talked about Newport River, and Chris mentioned on the north side going up towards Coal Creek where there wasn't much SAV, but you can go across that shrimp line 50 foot and you'll bury to your waist in silt. And there was a study done by the Belvedere dissertation that showed that in core sound that the effects of shrimp trawling could be just as beneficial benthic organisms as it was disadvantage. So when I hear that shrimp trawling, especially in these areas which are fairly shallow areas, most there, you've got small boats, small gear, small chains. You don't have a lot of turbidity, and there's studies are there that the turbidity from a hurricane is way worse than shrimp trawling ever thought about being. You had 3 advisors on the commercial side, Clyde Phillips, John Costner, and Donald Ipock, that did an excellent job reaching out to fishermen of areas that were worked or weren't worked. And we got that pretty good, I think, in the first one. Now we're going back to talk about the same areas those guys just talked about under the Shrimp Advisory Committee that they interacted with fishermen. And I think that the motion that was made by Dr. Posey was that there was a collaboration that should be with the industry, but yet we're having an AC meeting, and where's the collaboration in trying to get the closures and work with the industry? And I think that's exactly the intent of the motion. I think we're kind of a little off base here. And think if it goes back and look at the motion. So thank you.
Thanks and good luck. Can I comment about the Becky study? It was a double-sided coin with that stuff. Some of the benthic organisms did increase in productivity. They also found that it did because you removed from the top predators that were eating the benthic, stirring up the bottom. no smoking gun. The way I read it, everybody is open to what they see in it. I think it was left kind of inconclusive, if I remember correctly. And we have a write-up about it in Amendment 1 to Shrimp F&P gives, the division stance on where the results of that paper landed. Couldn't repeat it word for word right now, but amendment.
Yeah, let's move on through. Kenny Rustick, sorry if I mispronounced your name.
My name's Kenny Rustick. I'm from Gloucester. I keep my boat in Marshburg Harbor, work out of there. And I have since 1985. You all, the closures and straits, Jarrett's Bay, Nelson's Bay, North River, you've killed all the small boats in my area, Harker's Island, around there. That we're done. We can't make a living because that's where we work. In the bays, in the straits itself, in North River, that's where we work. You've closed. You're proposing closing, taking our livelihood right away. South River, I work there. Turnican Bay. I mean, you don't realize what you're really doing by doing this. As far as the grass was killed in Core Sound in 1989 when we had a snowstorm the week before Christmas and the sound froze over. That was in 1990 was the first year I put chain on my nets in Jarrett's Bay because the grass was gone. It's never come back. Same way to the banks. That was the downfall of the scallops. And there's not grass to the banks anymore like there used to be. It's real short. There's nowhere for the scallops to hide for predators and stuff. And it's certainly not trawling or dragging scallop dredges over there that's killed the grass. I can promise you that. I've worked in grass where I had to raise my nets 8 inches up to keep them out of it. They catch clear shrimp. And that's what our target is. We don't do to catch loads of grass and have to cull through them. It's too much work. We go after, we tune our rigs to catch clear shrimp. We put PVC pipe on our tickler chains where it rolls over the grass and stuff. I mean, you all, I don't know, this is just what I see is creating somebody a job and it's taking our jobs away from us. These studies and everything, it's just like Chris said, these are proposed permanent closures. Well, if they open it up in 10 years, so what? There ain't gonna be none of us left. We're not gonna be able to make a living, period. And that's it. Thank you.
My name is Bradley Starr. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members, and staff. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm assuming from the presentation given, the charge of this commission or committee is to protect the grass, small fish, and crabs. But like Kenny said, you're not protecting the shrimpers. And, I think that's something needs to be included in there. From the evidence I've seen, the crabs and fish would have a better survival rate than a shrimp larvae. So I don't see the damage. I mean, you talk about the grass. They had this discussion about 40 years ago. Dr. Al Chestnut, some of you don't even remember him, but he was a renowned biologist. And they posed the same question to him. What would happen if you turned all the trawlers loose? He said one northeaster will do more ecological damage to the grass beds and the sand than all the trawlers with all the gear they can muster. Now, he had a lot of common sense. You check that out and make sure that I'm telling you the truth, but if you got any doubts about it, you can check it. And what you need, what it looks like to me you need here, I'm not against trying to protect things, but you don't need to go about it the wrong way. And I'll give you a case in point. 10-acre lease was granted in 1952 to my uncle. And I tell you what you can't do. He used to grow a lot of oysters on that. Today, and I can prove this, I put 250,000 clams, polluted clams on that. Everyone died. And you know why they died? Because there's nothing but silt. Just like Brent told you a minute ago, the silt is that deep. Now I can tell you what I can do. In the upper water column, I can grow just good oysters I want to. But the proof's in the pudding. I think I applaud what you're trying to do, but I think you're going about it all wrong. Putting people out of business is not the answer. And that's exactly, you can disguise it any way you want to, but what Kenny just told you is the truth. When you close these places, look at what they do. That lease I'm telling you about, in 1960, I was 10 years old. And they opened that bay from one end to the other for shrimping. There's no telling how many shrimp was caught there. And I can tell you, you got trip tickets to find out. I'll bet you there were 500 pound caught there last year. So
Give us your time. Appreciate it.
proof's in the pudding. Appreciate the time.
Davis, Zach Davis.
Chair, committee. Name's Zach Davis. I'm from Marshallburg. I'll try to speak quick. It's a little slack. I noticed the South River map caught my eye. We've got about a 99% area closure for a 1% grass bed. If that doesn't tell a story, I don't know what does. He said himself that South River is a deep water body. On page 2 of your issuance papers, it says that anything above 6 foot is not conducive for SAV vegetation growth. Okay. So why close South River entirely? Why close the straits for that matter? I get the sedimentation is, you're trolling maybe, I don't know, 1/4 mile from the SAV area. That's not the issue. I've paid my taxes. I've made money for the last 5 years. These are the maps from 2021. I drew the lines in about 45 minutes that would keep us in business and protect y'all's SAV areas. In 45 minutes, I drew the lines that would meet our expectations and y'all's. You're telling me after paying taxes for 4 years, you can't come up with any other solution than this? Are you serious? Fellas, what have y'all been doing the last 4 years? You've opened up one channel in Wine Cheese. You'll move the channel for the Wine Cheesers, but by God, not for Marshallburger. I've got 15 copies. Y'all are more than welcome to look at it. Pass it around. We are willing to communicate and manage. But I'm not willing to go out of business without a fight.
Good evening. My name's Thomas Smith. I own and operate a 50-foot shrimp boat out of Beaufort, originally from Marshallburg. We also own, with my father, Miss Gina's Shrimp in Beaufort. We primarily sell seafood off of my boat and my father's boat. If this passes, it will put both of us out of business, along with the business we own together of providing fresh shrimp, state of North Carolina and beyond. The purpose of our market was to keep us in business with the influx of imports, but also provide it to the general public. And my primary area is your Adams Creeks, your South Rivers, your Core Sounds, and some of the other tributaries off the Pamlico Sound. I can go in Pamlico Sound, but I work some of these other areas of this closure. And if this passes as drawn, I'm out of business. He's out of business. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we put back into the market, but all that's going away. And I don't feel like there's any consideration for that. Not just me, but there's other fishermen who are not here, who we didn't really even know that the meeting was being held until this evening. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. I like protecting these areas. I love to see some of these scallops and things that I don't ever remember as a kid and before me, but I don't think we need to put everybody out of business in the meantime. Thank you all. It depends. If I'm in Pamlico Sound, I pull 4 nets, 4 38-foot nets. If I'm in these other 90-foot head rope areas, I'm pulling 45-foot to meet the 90-foot requirement. But I'm a shallow draft, so I still work. This year, I was limited in Core Sound because it was better in Pamlico Sound. But other years, your entire living comes from Core Sound and these other small places. And, you know, if this passes as drawn, got a business completely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, comment, discussion from committee members, further questions for the staff, or what's your pleasure?
It's, hearing, you know, a couple of things is, just that whatever we recommend should include the measurable points of success for this program. And so we're not just closing it down and discuss that there is some proof, some evidence out there. If it were to get closed, there's some, okay, it's working points, not just it's closed and gets tucked away. So sure, whatever we come up with for a comment, that there's measurable points and goals.
We can do anything that you want to do. In fact, if somebody wants to make a motion to put something specific on the table, if it's seconded for discussion, that's fine. Or we can have a more general discussion now. As a personal matter, I support eliminating direct trawl damage from existing seagrass beds, and those areas are likely to be able to become seagrass beds in the future. I'm not sure, as a personal matter, about how far away those disturbing activities would need to be. And thankfully, from at least my perspective here, that's a problem that Sarah and I and the rest of the commission will have to wrestle with at the upcoming meeting. Given that our job tonight really is to recommend what the commission ought to do, what the director ought to do on direction from the commission with related in terms of protecting habitat. Seagrass is a critical habitat. It might be that, you know, if we focus on that question principally at this point, we can make some progress. There's always the trade-offs that strike me above our pay grade here tonight, including some of the, we don't have the data or I think the training to evaluate. So what's your pleasure? Is there anyone who has a question about that you haven't heard the answer
I did have
to
a
yet?
question. I'm still stuck on South River because it's so deep. And a lot of the other areas that are closed are drawn with straight lines that don't run between channel markers. So it does seem kind of unusual to close that whole area, which is never going to have SAV. I mean, it's
Another option out
I mean-
there. Yeah, go over here and hit me if I'm wrong, but there is a designated pod area in that area. So that much of that bank is closed from June 1 to November 30th. Another option or recommendation you could have is to just extend the closure to that designated pod area. Then that would pretty much close what those fishermen are already currently used to.
Another possible option that we have on some of our other, trawling areas or pot areas is a distance from shore. So,
Marine Patrol
Re-
tell you that's hard.
yeah, but I'm just giving them options here.
it also must
like
might
multiple things.
wouldn't wouldn't necessarily protect SAV either. Certain areas may be far from shore, but they're shallow and they grow SAV.
I think there's a lot here that's beyond our expertise. I'm not
Yeah.
sure at all about the enforcement compliance questions related to 100-foot channel. But when I was working with the industry on similar questions on much larger areas in South Atlantic, in a directed way at how much space you need to operate a boat when the gear is on the bottom in 1,000 feet of water, for instance. Built those lines as practical compromises between operations of boats and gear. You can take back on the bottom in that depth with 5 knot currents. So I do think there's a lot of that question that goes beyond our capabilities. Now, and the commission will have to wrestle with stakeholders. So, I mean, as a personal matter, I'm not going to make a motion as chair, but I'm, as a personal matter, I would support an action by this panel to protect all known and potential seagrass habitat throughout the range and leave for the commission some of those questions about whether or not the specific lines that have been proposed by staff are adequate or more than adequate in terms of those compromise between boat operations and livelihoods and the protection that's necessary. So that sounds like it's kind of, splitting a hair, but it's my personal, not at your chair.
And I don't know if this makes any difference, but if you allow me to share a screen real quick, I can show you. This thing will work. Let's see.
Just for the record, in the patchy areas, those beds come and go through time. And if you're looking at 10 years or 100 years through time, trying to thread that needle is just not reasonable. Because that's of the appropriate depth and sediment type, that's my view, all seagrass habitat. So that all is requiring protection from direct disturbance and non-direct disturbance. But with the other questions about convenience is the wrong word, but the practicalities of implementing closure, I'm just not very comfortable with how those decisions have so far been made.
Be enforceable. We hear that a lot.
Enforceable.
Control.
That's right.
So that drove a lot of those.
And to me, that comes.
I kind of,
as a commission.
yeah,
I don't know.
that's kind of what made me wonder, is because like those boundaries, yeah, there's like good channel markers in South River and a lot of it, but there's not channel markers in Port Sound either. That, or at least not, that's not what's being drawn out here. So that just didn't seem to be consistent.
Mechanical clamps are the areas, that weird outline you see.
Is it got posts?
What I put on the screen is the designated pod area closure that's currently in effect right now from June 1 to November 30th. I know you said you don't want to nitpick, but I'd rather leave it to the commissions. I don't.
That was just
But
my fear of not understanding personally those trade-offs on those specific boundaries. So that I wasn't trying to speak for the committee.
But that's another option. If you guys want to throw something out there.
So how are these marked? These are not marked?
It's less than 6 feet of water. Been well established.
I understand, but it's not marked on the water and are there
That's up
complaints?
to Marine Patrol discretion.
Shrimpers don't go in less than 6 foot. I mean, it's common knowledge that if you're in Adams Creek or South River, just like the Straits Channel or back sound, you don't troll out of that channel. It's, there's sticks, there's twigs, there's SAV and core sound. We just don't go there. There's no need to go there.
Otter trawls can trawl much deeper, and shallow trawls such as skimmer trawls can actually get in less than 6 feet of water. So when you're looking at, say, New River, that closure came to mind, having to protect that. Because that area over there is fairly shallow, but there's a good amount of SAB resources. But I've been on the river enough to see some guys swing the bank because you got a skimmer trawl, 30, 40-foot booms on either side. He's not limited by how deep his boat can run. He can swing it in there. So in an area like the New River, we put thought into like what gears are predominantly used. I would say in South River, predominantly otter troughs. that are
Yeah,
staying right now.
too muddy to put skimmers in there. They've tried it.
So South River, that would work. New River might need special consideration.
Dr. Rader, Joel Fodry has his hand up.
Joe?
So from a strictly habitat conservation perspective, thinking mechanistically, trawling in the main channel of South River, or at least portions of the main channel of South River, I think trawling in the Straits Channel, directed regulation that keeps boats in the channel. I think that the identifiable expected damage to seagrass, given other conditions in these systems, is minimal. I'm not sure if we could codify that or if there's a way to pass that word along as a habitat advisory committee, or if there's agreement on that. I guess that's my opinion. A question that's kind of related because I'm ignorant. Within Straits Channel, there's also some channel netters. So maybe with the fishermen in the audience, what drives the decision to drag in it as opposed to put a channel net out? Because these if they were enforced, they don't stop channel netting, correct? This would just be dragging nets. Is that correct? And again, if so, the question about what about channel netting? Is it just not viable, or how does that shake out?
People could still channel net. Shrimp pot, you got a shoreline. Shrimp pots are not the most efficient way to shrimp by any means compared to a trawl.
I'm trying to figure out a way forward because I don't think we can we can't redraw lines here tonight.
The thing about channel net is you only have so many sets. You can't just go set a channel net anywhere you want.
Yeah, I'm, if you don't mind, sir, let's keep the further discussion till that for afterwards.
like Joel was.
Okay. Is that right?
You need the right tide, and you only got so much time to work.
I mean, but there's only so many sets that you can set a channel net. It's not like trolling, we're moving. But a channel net, there's only certain places that you can set it, do it in the way the tide falls through the bank. And, I mean, so you only have so many spots to set, so you can't just say, well, everybody go channel net because, we're closing trawl.
Great. Thank you, sir.
It's kind of territorial too. Like you got good sets, you're going to hold your good set.
So it seems to me like one way forward might be to endorse the staff's lines as presented, but with a recognition that, in order to protect 100% of known and likely developed seagrass habitats from direct fishing impact as part of a program to address non-fishing impact, fishing and non-fishing impacts together. But to recognize that there may well be included places where the likelihood of development of seagrass is low, and that the necessary adjustments and compromises that are necessary to take working with fishermen really ought to be pursued, and leave that question about narrowing it to the commission where it's going to reside anyway. I just don't see how we can tonight choose one or the other or more. I frankly am not going to support redrawing law here tonight. So unless, but someone have to make a motion to that effect or some other effect so we can move forward with that discussion.
I think that's particularly fair, especially considering that a lot of the thought process that's gone into some of these areas was enforcement and compliance, which really is a matter of manpower. And that's, I don't know, that's MFC's decisions, that's higher up government like level stuff.
But the sense of the committee, the way that I'm hearing it, is an intent to protect all existing and prospective seagrass habitat, and I would say from fishing and non-fishing threats, that we would endorse the proper actions to make that happen throughout the lines proposed by staff, except in places that are shown to not actually be practical seagrass habitat and where there are measures to exclude them that the commission would identify, something along. That, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to work our way through this. Would anyone like to make a motion or ask a different question? Or what I'd rather not do is just grind to a halt. I kind of hate to, is it relevant to, okay, well, I don't want to start this back again, but what's your name?
If you got a blanket closure of places in Core Sound, do we know the amount of area that's actually been worked in the past 15 or 20 years?
I don't think we do. Is that right?
Because the lady here kind of got stuck with a question a minute ago when the guy asked her if places that have been closed in these secondary nursery areas, if they had generated more grass, whatever it's like. And it kind of stumped her because she couldn't answer the question. Well, I can tell you, I've been stripping for 40 years. North River, up the street. And for the past 15 or 20 years, if he can bring that map up, of course, out, I could draw the point for Sharpie area that's closed and it won't get outside of the width of that Sharpie. So there's no grass in these other beds and these other areas that this blanket closure is closing. You're not doing it because those areas aren't worth anything.
And just for the record, what's your name, sir?
Alan Smith, I'm Thomas's dad.
Okay, great. Did you get that?
I mean, you're closing areas that you don't have no.
Yeah, if you don't mind, sir, I just don't want, given the time, I don't want to open it back up to debate.
Lisa gave a comment online in the chat while we were doing this. And she said that she recommends a motion include considerations for the voices of the stakeholder groups to include industry and small vessel fishers impacted by potential decisions.
He's a writer. So, which is basically what I said a moment ago. But again, we don't have a motion on the floor, and I would hope somebody.
Can you restate what you, I think I was about to make that motion.
Okay, well, I basically, yeah, I would do it in pieces where I'm making the motion. Number one would be to protect all existing and prospective seagrass habitat, again, recognizing that that means where there is vegetation now and where there is likely to be vegetation in the future if we fix the water quality problems and other things like the EMC and others are doing. So that's point one. Number two is to endorse generally the proposal made by staff with the proviso that the necessity that places where those lines include areas that are not likely ever to have seagrass habitat and that could theoretically be worked without threatening that habitat be further clarified and identified by stakeholders between now and the time of the commission. Well, that's most of it, isn't it? Seems like I had a third point in mind. Well, actually, there is a third point, and to me, that is a commitment be made by the commission and our partners through the CHIP process to quantify the current, continue quantifying the status of seagrass habitat in North Carolina and put in place a monitoring program that could track through time the performance of this and other measures meant for seagrass conservation. Something along that.
I'll just add on that last piece that APNIP has a scientific technical advisory committee, and they did a report recently where they did quantify change based on the mapping documents that they had, and that is available. But what I didn't know is you can't say what.
I'm asking for more than that, which is to actively monitor through time the progress, not not do a report, but to commit to a monitoring program.
Yeah. That'd be great.
AppNet could do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Anyway, those are the points that I would make. And again, you can tailor it any way you want to.
Operator Joel Fodry said strike seagrass for SAV.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
But you're right. And when you say seagrass, right now,
Flip of the tongue.
my understanding is AppNet's efforts are really in seagrass area, which is like out there on the banks mostly. And, you know, it's not so much in these lower salinity areas. It's really hard to do low salinity SAV. But that's where a lot of the shrimping's going on too, is in the lower salinity areas. So
It's pretty interesting where the water quality standard development as it's underway is actually partitioning those things and looking at the different factors that affect the prospects of survival of submerged aquatic vegetation in each of those settings and tailoring them to them. So in theory, through time, we could do that. I will observe that we should not take today's salinity patterns for granted. With rising seas, intensifying storms, the wrong one storm could radically shift those salinity patterns. And then if you were trying to bring back something that was there in the past that never could be there again, or was unlikely to be based on those large scale shifts, in deep trouble. I do think that's an important point. Would the staff have a reaction to a motion like that?
I asked, would you include wording to include buffers, or at least the notion of using buffers? It's, I mean, I'm not an AC member. That was one of our main
sedimentation.
That was one of our main recommendations, was to, create buffers to protect them from sedimentation.
Yeah, but well, so my feeling about that is yes, but.
I think that falls under the endorsed general proposal of staff.
Yeah, it does, but I do think.
I don't want the commission to have to read it.
I think a lot of, I'm getting way far off on up on us. I think a lot of really great things have been done using the buffer approach, and a lot of things done both that weren't so effective. And so, in my view, if you buffered the whole world, the efficacy of buffer decisions ought to be based on the likelihood of negative impacts and the trade-offs on negative impacts on social and economic, and for that matter, cultural, personal, community impacts. And so again, that gets outside of our wheelhouse, I think. So I think we can, yes, in terms of areas where sedimentation particularly is likely to have a direct effect on the relative value of seagrass habitat, meaning its likelihood of supporting and maintaining the presidency of SAVs. Sorry. I'm an old guy, I fall back into the old terminology.
So
Anyway,
on your second point about support that recommendation with the exception of it is not likely to support SAV.
What I meant was, I don't mean they wouldn't automatically be cut off because of the practical considerations of implementation. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to the industry to say it's okay to go do this and setting them up to get tickets and to fight it in court because we didn't do our job in laying out a practical solution.
Asking what would be the areas likely not? What would be the?
I think between tonight and the submission meeting, there should be an opportunity for staff to weigh in directly on areas with a focus on areas that are greater than 6 feet deep and that are in their view, and with information to support that view, are practically acceptable. It's EX, not ACC. It's areas that could be effectively teased out that are not likely to ever sustain seagrass habitat, and that could maybe, and I don't think we can do that, but I do think that people experienced on the water industry could do that. I'm not going to use this word. Well, maybe I will, just for the, if there's an overreach here, the commission needs to know where, with some accuracy, where working together that are deeper than need to be protected to meet this 100% now and in the future goal. And if there's a practical way to do it, let's find it. But we can't do that tonight. And I really do think that between now and the commission meeting, that focused information could come into the commission. I would appreciate it. How do you feel about it?
It's a lot more. I think we have to have a lot more discussion about.
I assume that you gentlemen will be bringing the same feelings and information back to the commission at that meeting regardless. And so the more of that we can build together, the better, rather than saying, let's just flush the whole toilet and do away with it.
I think one thing that it came up a couple times on the enforcement side, and I've done enforcement in my past, is, and I recognize on the enforcement side, you gotta have things like very clear cut to the public and to the law enforcement. And it's brought up about, budget and costs and all that. I think that is not in, the budget cost is not in the spirit of the Habitat quality advisory. Like we're making a recommendation that
yes,
and then
that's right.
The further enforcement, the sector should weigh in on, well, hey, this is how we could enforce it, but I think that it's for others, like you were talking about South River, or other areas to have these, there's not really an aid to navigation. Well, they're paying their renewal fees and their license upgrades, and that should pay for some of those things. So I think it's something we should take that supports that second. Because it's not within our bounds, in my opinion, to say that's an enforceable area versus unenforceable. In the spirit of preserving SAV, that's not really relevant.
And just to be clear, I'm not being critical of staff either. I just know how hard it is to draw these things.
It is.
But I personally am persuaded by the interaction that's happened before that there could be some adjustment here that would work to everybody's advantage. I think we ought to endorse the intent, and then also a process that would lead to that clarification.
Help to define what the criteria and closures, let's make it definite. How people can understand that.
Or maybe the other way.
Can't hear you online.
I just think that we need to define what the criteria really is for those closures, not just historic, what was there grass there in the past, but to really kind of look at that depth, look at water quality, and be realistic about where it will and will not come back. Because making those blanket closures is going to shut people down permanently, and I don't think that that's the intent. And especially when there's so many other factors that play into what's going on in the sound in terms of water quality. And I mean, I come from an area where there isn't a lot of shrimping going on, but we're still seeing a lot of SAV loss. And I also fish in an area where there is a lot of activity and habitat loss as a result, but it's like all user groups. And so I think that we have a responsibility to, I think, really define that and get that aspect of.
It's an interesting idea, Sarah. I wonder if it would, flipping the thing around and basically clarifying the criteria for how you would take areas out, that are needless, that would not benefit from being protected, but that would also not create undue risk because of the practical logistics. Something. How do you want to proceed? We've got a little bit of time left. If there are questions on the table, I'm not trying to push you to action. On the other hand, if we're going to get things done that coming meeting between now and then, we probably ought to get something.
One last question. That would have to do with a perspective closure of the area. So having a meeting on this and discussion on this today for February, for potentially May, to say, yeah, we're going to close everything down and economic impacts. Is there a other way to roll out closures versus, a long-term. If these are areas that didn't die off in the last 2 years because of current damage, is there a way we could roll these out in lieu of, hey, we're shutting all that down? I don't necessarily know if that fits within there, but I think that's something that should be in consideration that, unless this was damage caused immediately and we have to cease today, is there something that we can do a more long-term plan to manage?
I think the idea of a long-term plan is an important one and one that is not yet gathered. In other words, we could take some of the discussion from before and advocate, maybe as point 4, the development of an SAB conservation plan that would track through time, that would create goals of coverage that are consistent with the conservation needs of the North Carolina coastal system, including supporting fish habitat, but also other benefits, and a tracking system for keeping track of where we stand versus that, identifying areas where decline is continuing, where regrowth is occurring, where and other activities that might happen, and that in effect is already in, but it's not there that way, and there, at least I don't think it is.
It's kind of like the issue paper itself was SAB protection and restoration.
Right.
But
There's
you're
nothing
saying-
in there that sets a goal for.
Well, we do have a goal. The goal is to protect and restore the historic extent, which is 191,000 acres. That's the goal. So that means increasing SAB now, because now we have less than that. But if you take that full maximum extent map, it's 191,000.
So just to play devil's advocate for that goal, you actually don't know where the Outer Banks are going to be, what the prospective distribution of appropriate salinity and depth and light penetration and current impingement is going to be in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. I'm just trying to push it into so that we're working towards a clear stated goal that we all agree on. So those numbers may be impossible under some future conditions, right? And so we're not trying to go back to historic conditions, but towards an optimum future, right? And this is me. I'm not.
It's a lot like the marsh projections now with climate change. We may lose a lot of marsh in certain areas, but in others it may migrate as the fresh Albemarle system gets saltier. And so we just don't have exact numbers. We know where the trends are going.
It's a good example, Anna. So if for instance, you locked yourself into the correct distribution of high salinity marsh, middle salinity marsh, and low salinity marsh, it could well be not possible under most of the sea level rise conditions to meet those targets because of the trade-offs and changing salinity. Anyway, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole, but I think I would support that we should endorse the development of a plan like that built upon the CHIP and other such plans. But I heard one more thing, and it seems like you're interested in where things are failing, that there be a mechanism, a time frame set and a mechanism to revisit the degree to which that is required as an optimum investment in the future of those habitats. Meaning if things are continuing to be degraded from within the closure zones, for instance, from other threats, and that we're not getting a benefit at some point, that there be a mechanism built in so that we would have to come back and revisit the degree to which it was working. Did I hear that? Something like that?
A whole lot more words, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
No, you work through it very well.
Yeah, okay.
And also the MFC definition for SAB has in there, was documented within the past 10 years. So in other words, if you want to assess it at 5 years and the grass has gone down and you make changes based on that, you're not being consistent with the definition. So I think 10 years is what you would need to consider. You know, you understand what I'm saying? Not too, it fluctuates, right? So you don't want to go too short of a time frame.
If we lost it in an area that's being trawled in, you know, and it was 10 years ago it was there and now it's not. Yes, trawling could have been a positive factor. Could have. But if 10 years time, it wasn't being trawled in, or it was already gone 10 years ago, like the regrowth rate, it would need to be monitored to.
Yeah, to me, the joker though is we're still not sure, at least I don't think scientifically, as a matter of fact, you could delineate areas that have been lost from water quality or clarity or other causes as opposed to, and so there should be some time to resolve those kinds of issues, I think, before we write it off. I'm getting at. So, well, we do not have them. Is somebody online wanting to say something?
Yeah, yeah, this is Mark Pierce. I'd like
Go ahead,
to
Mark.
speak. Yeah, someone from Western, Bug Sound and everything, Strawley has been closed there for many years, except with the exception of the intercoastal waterway. Our seagrass situation is worse now than it has been in years. I mean, we're kind of jumping at one source, which is going to affect a lot of people's livelihood. But it's really, I think, a minor factor when you're taking all the risks considerations like non-point pollution, sedimentation, acidity of the water. I think all of those have to be addressed if we're going to, I mean, we're talking about water quality and habitat, all of those, not just one thing. I mean, granted, years ago, when there was scallop dragging and everything, it did a lot of damage to the scallop, to the seabeds and stuff because it was just dragging away the grass. But that was stopped years ago. So I'm having a hard time getting behind this, because I don't think it is the primary source of our problem. I mean, we've got to go look at some other, things that are affecting our water quality that nobody's really willing to go out after. I mean, runoff and everything from agricultural and things like that, not really been addressed, and the commission has failed to do that. So my thoughts are we need to put a little bit more into this if we're going to make a suggestion, to the division to what they're going to do. I mean, that's just my thoughts.
Thanks, Mark.
I would too.
I was just gonna say, we are addressing a lot of that, Mark, in the CHIP through the other actions, which Doug mentioned at the beginning, the water clarity standards. And we know that trawling is one piece and probably a smaller piece at this point of the problem than other things, but we have to address all the pieces or we're not going to have success.
And just to be clear about that, I mean, this is the piece that's under our purview.
Right.
The other pieces we support, and the commission is on record having supported through the CHIP and its adoption. And our brother and sister commissions are moving forward with the development of that standard that will have a big effect on many of those impacts.
Well, the only thing I would ask to add to the motion would be that we take in advisement the stakeholders as well. Both.
That's very loud and clear. Thank you for that.
If you would add that to the motion, I would go ahead and make the motion and second, have a second for it.
Do you want to, is there something specific? I mean, the way we had set it up was to have stakeholders directly invited between now and the time of the commission meeting to bring information forward about the very specific questions. about, in effect, excesses of the proposal to identify places where the protection is unnecessarily expansive. And so that's, at least in my view, that's similar to what happened before, at least what I wasn't here. But the back and forth between staff and stakeholders on to draw the lines last time. No, you don't think so?
Well,
Anyway,
I'm looking as you got it written now, and I'll go ahead and make that motion, yeah, if you want to. Because,
well,
yeah,
let's just lay it out as number 5, which is to adequately engage.
What I have right now, if you want to
I can't see.
view it.
Okay.
Those areas that cannot provide habitat, I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with, identified by the stakeholders. I mean, I think we have.
I was just typing as he was saying.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
so this is what needs to be wordsmithed.
Yeah, I mean.
And I also, I mean, this is a question for the director maybe, but I don't know if we have enough time between today and the MFC meeting to get a stakeholder meeting together.
I'm not advocating a meeting, because the notice provisions couldn't possibly be met, right?
Well, there's no time to have an action such as that done before this MFC meeting.
I don't think it's our job to decide whether you can or can't. What we're doing is identifying the need for enhanced stakeholder engagement and recognizing places where this approach is unlikely to work and maybe unnecessary. And so I think that commitment to refining that is really what we're talking about.
So just on that, could I just ask if we could remove prior to MFC meeting and just put identified by stakeholders?
Stakeholder process, period. Okay.
I agree. So.
No, not by stakeholder, but I just say it by stakeholder process.
I don't know
To
what that
me,
means.
the area
I know.
that can't support SAP.
If you say by stakeholders, that means they get to decide as opposed to a back and forth between staff and.
Okay, so,
With stakeholders?
but
I would say with,
through stakeholder engagement.
okay, that's fine.
Chris had a suggestion.
If you want to get stakeholder engagement, could add, and I'm not an AC member, so you could add that you asked to take it out to the northern and southern regional and shellfish advisory committees. And then that would provide significant time for stakeholders to come and express their views. I'm throwing it out there. If it's a bad idea,
That would be the.
You would have to ask the MFC.
I have a
to
feeling
request that.
that that's what's gonna happen.
you don't have to recommend that, yes.
I have it written. That made y'all come to this meeting because it touches on something.
Okay.
It's number 7 in the motion that was passed for the shrimp amendment.
For the record, this is Mr. Glenn Skinner.
This is Glenn Skinner, and it says that the Division of Marine Fisheries collaborate with the ship support staff and the Habitat and Water Quality Advisory Committee on issues related to SAB habitat. As the division deems appropriate and feasible, actions to address that impact will be identified by the appropriate committees brought to the MFC in the future. Action, part of adaptive fisheries management, preparation of stakeholder groups, advisory committees. So that's already in the motion. They're supposed to be collaborating, not just 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a collaborative process and also include the advisory committee. So that was in the motion that brought us all into this room. So I just wanted to get that on record and
okay,
y'all can set the motion how you
I
want.
think this is consistent with that. We
I
can.
do too. I just have a
Joel has
problem
had
with.
his hand up as well.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, just, the areas that cannot provide habitat for SAVs, to me, that should be DMF, Division of Water Quality, people that have an expertise in deciding where seagrass, yeah.
I think that was his point.
But then, once you've identified those areas, to me, that's when the collaborative part of a stakeholder should come in. It's like, okay, here's the areas we know realistically, we're not gonna see SAVs growing. So which of these areas are areas y'all wanna? Or, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I think the lack of
So-
commas in this sentence is what's getting you.
Maybe.
Um,
No, I was going to raise the same point. So what this says as written is that stakeholder engagement will identify where seagrass can grow.
Yes.
And that's not our meaning at all. Nate pretty much nailed it. So that middle section needs revision.
Close to it.
So if I may wordsmith for you, please feel free.
Yeah,
to
there's
let me
also
know.
just the wording. It says include areas which cannot provide habitat to those areas. So that whole middle thing probably just needs some tuning.
So, okay, to the. Okay, staff.
The stakeholder engagement needs to come if there are clearly identifiable areas that are not likely to ever grow seagrass in our foreseeable future, to work with them to figure out where some allowances have to be made. That's way too wordy, but that's the point. That's just not in here at all.
I don't want to say that. So I think what you're trying to get at here, and I need help with words here as well, is so the science clarifies and identifies this. And then there needs to be an action here that is then taken through the stakeholder and engagement. And what I thought you were saying is that new lines would be drawn
But what I was trying to,
or
yeah, I think what,
modified. That's
So-
what.
so there is-
Modify the lines.
there is an underlying science product already here, which is 100% covered grass habitat. What they've already tried to do themselves is to take that and adapt it to the real world in terms of looking at buffers and connectivity and where buoys happen to be and where people use things. And we're just basically saying that that process of protecting the core areas through a set of measures requires a stakeholder process to recognize those trade-offs. So to me, we could, if we're going to wordsmith it and just say endorse the general proposal by staff, and I would put a comma in. Can you not put commas?
I can. I was feeling there need to be several commas in here.
Semicolon there. And that they would proviso that areas which cannot provide habitat
Be identified.
identified and
And
necessary
reassessed. Be
necessary
identified.
necessary management be evaluated through a stakeholder process, with stakeholder engagement.
Science really stated there somewhere. I want to say like identified via updated imagery or something and clarified by stakeholders.
First sentence, but we should.
Well,
Like we already have the science. The science is that the maximum extent, it's been documented there. It's suitable depth, it's suitable wave exposure. The only thing that might have changed is clarity, and that can change back. So I feel like that is your starting point.
Thought that was in sentence number 1. Is that not there?
I'm just
So,
clarifying that we don't have to revisit.
So let me kind of put what I'm hearing here. And I'm going to use South River as, which is where this came from, as our example. So what you're asking for is to support the division's existing prospective SA habitat endorsement. However, in areas such as you pointed out in the South River, you would like where areas SAV could never grow, them be identified and work with a stakeholder group to see how to modify those lines to provide benefit for the SAV and the users.
That sounds exactly what I was thinking.
Write that down.
It's on YouTube Live.
Does anybody have the recorder out?
So, I mean, that's what I was getting was what Nathan was getting at, and I'm sorry, Scott. I'm not sure how that comes in line with what you were saying. It's the same, right?
It is. Gotta be, I mean, a simpler way to.
Like you said it perfectly. I just wish somebody was writing.
I mean, I,
To that.
Have it enabled on. Wordsmith it.
okay, so. And Mark, if you're still willing, at the end of this, we can go over that. I'm just winging it here.
Okay.
To help you all and move this process along. Okay, so endorse the vision. And now. Okay, we're all not gonna be able to read
The
this.
division's
for a while.
recommendation to protect.
Yeah. I need to.
All
Okay. Endorse the division. Recommendations to protect existing and prospective SAV habitat. And in areas where, and in proposed closure areas where it's going to be different. SAV is
It's unlikely to support.
yeah. In proposed closure areas where SAV cannot be supported in portions of proposed. I'll make it bigger in a second. In portions of proposed closure areas where SAV cannot be supported, the division and work with stakeholders to maximize SAV protection while minimizing stakeholder impact. Or not impact, stakeholder.
To reduce.
Reduce impact on stakeholder use. Please wordsmith.
The only thing that's not gonna support SAVs It's pretty much broken down to depth. I'm just,
We have that.
no, but it's not up there, so it's being,
But there's other things as well.
so many variables can lead into water. I just hate to make it so open-ended that anybody can be like,
But 6 feet in core sound, you may see a little bit of seagrass down there, but you're not gonna see seagrass in. Well, I was gonna say, you're not gonna see seagrass in 6 foot, most likely in South River or Turning Bay or.
And Pamlico Sound, more than that, I mean, deeper than 6 feet.
Yeah, but it's not South River or Turning Bay.
If we were gonna, if we believe that, we would just use a 6-foot depth. We need to live.
Yeah, we need to be more.
Flexibility both ways.
Yeah.
I like the generic, as far as a statement, we're not, I'm not a scientist, I'm not professional, but the generic or the general statement is much more applicable from myself than it is to say, hey, water depth is the factor, trawl depth. I think to keep it as general as possible. So.
Just delete the and. Second sentence.
I'd say it is, however.
it will work with stakeholders.
No, there.
Wait,
Second sentence.
sorry.
Capital. The division should. Using.
While reducing impact.
Just reducing. Can we recapture the longer term monitoring planning sentence from before, from above? That was an important point. Should be made.
Put that in as the second sentence.
I think it's good at the end. Most of it is kind of, so. To do that's going to require. Okay with that, if somebody wants to. I'll make that motion.
Tried to read your brain.
Is there a second? Discussion on the motion. Discussed it and discussed it. Hearing none, let's go by roll call vote. And the motion is,
Mark, did you have a comment?
was that a comment, Mark?
No, I was getting ready to second it, but it looks good to me. I'm good with it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you'll get the vote in a moment. You want to do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Bart Durnham,
My vote in favor of this,
we are voting on this motion.
This motion.
I'll agree.
David Glenn,
Agree.
Joel Quadri,
Yes.
Nathan Hall,
Yes.
Scott Leahy, Mark Parrish,
Yes.
Lisa Ryder.
Yes.
Okay, Mark Sonder. Absent, right?
As a leader. It's absent right now.
Doug Rader
Aye.
and Sarah Gardner.
Yes.
Okay,
Great. Motion passes.
motion passes.
Now we have a couple of, other, going back to the minutes.
Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at them? Okay. There is a motion and seconded, really seconded on the floor. Is there other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Is that okay to do?
Yeah, this is fine for any dissent.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that the All right. Issues, other issues from committee. Things that, we've actually made a lot of progress on things that people have brought up at these meetings, including indirectly from stakeholders. So are there things that we should put on a list to be considered, to be brought back to you? Somebody said something earlier, was it? No. Somebody identified something we were supposed to. Rats. My poor brain is Swiss cheese.
It'll be in the minutes.
Okay. Okay.
And
it'll
we'll
be
get
in-
those at the
yeah,
MFC
that'll be
meeting.
good. Okay, so other things.
One thing is we're talking about SAB, and some stuff, shoreline. Marsh grass and growing marsh grasses and talk about SAB. If there's any efforts currently transplanting, growing or reintroducing SAB. We're talking about all these management measures to save and actually hope that grasses will just take care of themselves. I think it's something that we should be looking forward or looking towards as a solution to grow SAB. And then I don't know of any efforts that are going on in that realm successfully.
We have the world's experts at, in the Beaufort lab, right?
Well, I was gonna mention Jesse
Jesse Jarvis at UNCW.
has a proposal with other, some other SAB scientists to start, an eelgrass or other SAB seed bank, more or less. So they've been doing genetic work and it's in a proposal stage now, but
I think it's a great idea, and to be clear, we're doing that with shellfish beds, right?
We are.
And although Marty on the record is saying, I would love to see that 50 acres or hectares or whatever it is per year rate targeted on some outcome. You know, what do we aspire to as shellfish beds? We can't cover all of Pamlico Sound in the next year. What do you do? Right? So it'd be great for these things to start coming together. Setting goals and then finding investments. A lot of money's been spent in that program, and I think we can go find it also for SAVs to the extent that it's going to be productive. In other words, if we fail to get the water quality standard in place, for instance, or well, even in that case, there are areas that would be more or less suitable for reintroduction, right? And so if we can find a resource stream to begin doing that in places where it's most likely to survive, that seems like a great part of that plan. Is that consistent with what you're saying?
Got it.
Okay. Other things. Oh, one thing I to mention. So I think you're aware that a lot of the commission's work happens through fishery management planning. And so the one that's under development right now with several, one that is particular of interest to us is the oyster hard clam FMPs. And so it isn't clear to me yet that we have had an adequate chance to take a bite at that apple early enough in the process and not just be reviewing a draft FMP, fishery management plan, when it comes back to us, but to look at opportunities to identify priorities for conservation and also for investment through existing programs, voluntary programs that begin on fishing fronts and non-fishing fronts. So I would like to see staff bring us those plans every time for every single one. I didn't feel like we had much input into the striped mullet plan, and we might have been able to do that, for instance.
The oyster clam is just in the beginning scoping stages, so that could be on schedule at some point and leave it up to
other staff to say when that would be best. No, they've said before they wanted to like be able to weigh in on some issues to address early on rather than draft.
Process wise, during scoping is the best time for that to occur. Which scoping for that plan heard already. However, we are currently still taking comment on that. due to a lack of public participation in that scoping. So there is a public questionnaire that's still open on that plan. And if you all, I mean, if there is nothing for you all at your next meeting, that could be something that's added, because it is still in the early stages, I guess, but, typically,
Well, why don't you guys
typically what
just take it
happens,
under advisement
yeah.
and come back with your recommendation to us. Areas where the expertise of the panel might be useful.
Yeah, so typically when that would occur, would be, after the Oyster Clam Advisory Committee, reviews it and it's ready for that first draft when it goes to public comment. That is typically when this group would, take that charge. It's
And I'm try-
outside the
I'm-
process a
I'm
little
trying-
to
I'm
do
trying
that
Push
earlier.
you on that though, because.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get at. You want, so what I hear is you want that earlier than that.
Well, in that case, the non-fishing impacts are likely not only dominant, but vastly predominantly dominant. And so therefore, the relief that we all seek is going to be found outside the footprint of the regulatory actions of this commission. But we have a lot of leverage through the CHIP steering committee process that Commissioner Huggins and I chair, and that we sit on to look at what the EMC is doing, what the CRC is doing, and for that matter, what the other institutions, the non-commissioned institutions are doing. And my opinion, sorry if the director doesn't like this, but my opinion is that we should not be hesitant to make recommendations outside that footprint. So if there are things, and.
Oh, so like through the CHIP, like recommendations to EMC and
The
things like that is
EMC,
what you're
put
looking.
South Atlantic
Okay.
Council, the Middle Atlantic Council.
Okay,
As the habitat water quality.
Right.
okay.
Like,
Um,
like I think that
I will-
what they, with the, oyster
Station, the information, the issues they got.
Yeah.
That would be suitable.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
It's still general, but they have some ideas.
I think we're getting FMPs that are mostly fishing targeting, obviously. I mean, that's the 90% of, or 80 or 90% of the regulatory purview of the commission. But we have this whole architecture set up that allows us, the commissions to influence each other. And in theory, at least, also influence the Wildlife Commission and other bodies that are not tied in the same way that the EMC and the CRC, Environmental Management Commission, the Coastal Resources Commission, are tied as the Marine Fisheries Commission to the implementation of the CHIP. So we're absolutely have leverage to address non-fishing threats to these habitats. And so I just would like to have those priority needs reflected in the FMPs.
Okay, so, from FMP process perspective, what I would recommend is that you ask for that to be on your next meeting. Because I'm concerned it would be too late on that.
Okay.
But that's,
Well, why-
I won't be here, so I'm not.
For an answer to not, I want you to come
And-
back to
yeah,
us with a
Okay,
recommendation about how
Yeah.
we can make a difference.
yeah,
How we can weigh in on the non-fishing.
okay.
pieces of-
Typically, that would be Laura's go-to, and so I'm already missing her.
But what I'm trying to prevent is we get a draft plan that's 90%, 99%. We see things that aren't in it, require rewriting, and to me, that's not the way to go.
Okay.
About it, yeah, like with staff and decide when and how.
Apple Watch says its battery is dead.
It's 8:17.
Okay, so we're past time. Did anybody else have anything you didn't have a chance to bring up?
Lisa just put a comment in that CCRW is working on a few research projects in the next 3 years studying oysters, wild and farm raised populations relative to potential water quality concerns brought up by the industry. For the upcoming oyster and clam FMP, she would like a heads up on data backing up recommendations. And facilitating a presentation if possible.
Why don't you fold that into that same?
Yeah, and just so you know, Lisa, the current amendment for oyster will only be wild oysters. It will not be covering farm-raised oysters in that amendment because of the habitat enhancement programs now covering that purview.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
And people in the audience for coming tonight. I'd love to see you here. We've had a very quiet audience often. Thank you very much for your time. Sure. Thank you.
So this is my last meeting with you all.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I guess I should have known.
I'm, well, I just told everybody the other day that, next month, the commission meeting's my last day.
What are you doing?
I am going to Maine. I'm going to be the Green Resources Management Coordinator for Maine, doing a lot of the ASMSC and, council management stuff. In Massachusetts. Well,
A fair amount of work, way back with the New England Council. Most recently is Native Maine.